was important to do this work well and to put everything we could put into it in terms of our, I always thought that it was important to be as truthful as possible and to express the ideas from my heart, and only then could they really be accepted in a way that was unique to what I could do as an artist.
Cultures, languages, wizards, creatures, evil forces, lush landscapes, a deeply emotional narrative, and most importantly, rich three-dimensional characters. For many of us, Lord of the Rings isn't simply another film franchise or book series. It's a journey that once completed feels almost impossible to describe. It feels like us as an audience really did follow the characters on that journey, all the way from the Shire to Mount Doom and back. As music journalist and musicologist Doug Adams points out, J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings has enthralled readers for decades. We have related our personal lives to the universal themes, the importance of friendship, the intricate layers of the story's construction, the languages, customs, art, and lore. The question is, how do you take something so vast, filled with so many elements, and bring it to the world of film? How do you lift the words of J.R.R. Tolkien off the page and bring them to life? Cinematic storytelling on this magnitude is built from so many different layers. The visuals, screenplay, direction, performances, sound design, and of course, music. In film scores, composers use tools called themes to help associate a specific musical idea with a character, place, item, etc. For composer Howard Shore, one of the most important aspects in bringing this world to life in a musical format was the thematic material. This, combined with the multitude of harmonic languages, use of orchestration, and the utilization of choral text derived from Tolkien's writing, created the musical world of The Lord of the Rings. Throughout the films, there are dozens and dozens of themes. These themes are largely flexible and used in a variety of ways with different accompaniments and in different situations to complement the narrative. Because Middle-earth is so vast, the themes describe everything from the various cultures, Middle-earth's antiquity, the evil forces gaining power and strength, the various kingdoms and creatures, to the rich characters that populate the story. For example, the musical themes of the ancient elves utilize chromaticism, more specifically, the Lothorian elves, which possesses a strong Phrygian sound. This use of chromaticism is also utilized in the Ring theme and Mordor's theme. This relationship between the thematic material also describes a relationship between different elements in the story. Isengard uses metal hits, low brass, and a 5/4 time signature to describe its industrialism. The themes for the Shire and the Hobbits, on the other hand, are sweet and pure, living mainly within the major scale. Another major element in Shore's work in the Middle-earth films was his use of the various languages of Middle-earth. The ancient Elvish languages, the language of the dwarves, the languages of men, etc. They are all used throughout the score and add a strong sense of detail and purpose. One of the most important aspects in Shore's music was his orchestral menu. Looking at the series from afar, it's evident that Shore explored a massive amount of different styles and utilized different instruments from all around the world to bring something truly unique to that musical landscape. But in terms of his approach to the orchestra, Adams describes it as being carefully limited and particular. Shore said, quote, "I feel like I had to maintain a particular vision. That's one of the reasons that I did all the orchestrations." Adams describes the orchestral setup as being a customary assortment of woodwinds, brass, percussion, strings, choruses, and with a large assortment of soloists throughout. Shore worked with the orchestra as a single mass and based all the orchestrations on the various ranges of the instruments. This made for a unique, and as Adams refers to it, a fitting musical parallel to Middle-earth, a cohesive sound encompassing its abundant inhabitants. Howard Shore's work on the Middle-earth films are a true example of what's possible in terms of sheer scale in film music. And it was this relationship between his musical work, Peter Jackson's vision, and the team both in front and behind the camera making it possible that made way for these timeless films. In the Fellowship of the Ring, we are first introduced to the world of Middle-earth, and with it, the iconic musical landscape that Howard Shore created. The brilliant web of themes and motifs, harmonic languages, stunning orchestral textures, and unique ethnic elements. In the opening scene of the Fellowship of the Ring, we are greeted to a world full of history, darkness, and legend. The first thing we hear is the theme for the Lothlorien Elves, performed by an atmospheric woman's choir. This is to describe the origins of the ring. We also have fragments of Sauron's theme and the Ringwraith theme, which both play a pivotal role in the first film. In addition, we have faint echoes of the Fellowship theme, which acts as a predecessor to the journey that's about to begin. Another theme introduced in the prologue that plays a strong role in the series is the Weakness and Redemption theme, which, as Doug Adams describes, is the musical element that represents failure and reconciliation. The themes associated with the ring include the famous History of the Ring theme, which is initially introduced on the title card, signifying the centerpiece of the story to follow. It's built of a rising and falling chromatic pattern. We also have the Evil of the Ring / Sauron theme, which has an aggressive and, as Adams describes, a snarling tone. This theme commonly includes the use of a raita, a Moroccan double-reed woodwind instrument. This theme is very commonly in The Two Towers, and even more so in The Return of the King. Another prominent theme is the Seduction of the Ring theme. This is more subtle yet still dark, carried by a faint boys choir and a bass drum. This theme is used throughout the film to signify the ring's ability to influence the one who possesses it.
Would you destroy it?
A prominent and powerful theme in The Return of the King that is carried throughout the whole series is the Ringwraith theme. As described in the first act of the film, the Ringwraiths are the ancient kings that fell under Sauron's rule. This theme describes the fall of something that was once noble, taking the powerful sonic identity of the choir and combining it with striking clusters, creating something that is both sinister and powerful. The choral accompaniment is translated as follows: "We renounce our maker. We cleave to the darkness. We take unto ourselves the power and glory. Behold, we are the Nine, the lords of unending life." Mount Doom is a theme that is all about power, describing a geographical location in Middle-earth that was the origins of the conflict in the series. Interestingly enough, it uses similar harmonies to Gollum's theme, which seems to create a ghostly echo of the source of his madness. The Power of Mordor theme is a much more drawn-out theme, and describes the militaristic power of Sauron. It's built of a high chord cluster played in the choir and trumpets, and below that stabs on the bassoon, contrabassoon, and the horns. Isengard is all about the combination of evil and industrialism. Because of its simplicity, the 5-beat pattern isn't necessarily a theme that so much evolves as it does reappear, and blend into different moments to describe the presence of Isengard or the echoes of it. Normally layered with this 5-beat theme is the Isengard Orc theme, representing the ruthless brutality of the orcs. As Adams points out, the motific qualities of Isengard and Mordor's thematic material, such as the descending thirds, is the source of the musical link between the two towers. As we move into the Shire, we have a warm and peaceful musical tone. The sound of a whistle takes over from the bombastic brass and choral elements in the previous section, and we're introduced to the main characters that we'll be following throughout the story. The Shire theme that we've come to love is actually made up of multiple parts. The first fragment is the pensive setting theme, which functions as the true heart of the Hobbit's musical content, and a musical representation of the Shire as a whole. We also have the rule setting theme, which has a light Celtic sound, The Hobbit's understanding theme is peaceful and functions as the emotional backbone of the Hobbits and their way of life. The home setting theme is used to describe the Hobbits as they're exposed to the darkness of the outside world. These themes are used throughout the trilogy to not only follow our main characters on their journey, but to represent their home, the place they hope to return to one day after their journey is complete. Even as they approach Mordor in the final film and are literally on Mount Doom, farthest away from home as they could possibly be, the theme functions as a faint memory and a tool of perseverance.
9 companions. So be it. You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring.
Right. Where are we going?
The Fellowship theme is a massively important element in the Lord of the Rings films. It's the theme that unites many of our main characters and follows them along their journey. It's used in a variety of orchestration settings, but is mainly carried by the brass. Part of what makes this theme so functional is its incredible versatility.
We will not abandon Merry and Pippin to torment and death. Not while we have strength left.
Leave all that can be spared behind.
As the Fellowship breaks apart, though, throughout the trilogy, so does the theme. This is another example of how Shore's approach is constantly affected by the narrative of the films. For example, one of the main motifs in the Fellowship theme, the Drive of the Fellowship, is actually a cryptic message, made up of 9 notes describing the 9 characters in the Fellowship. When Aragorn is first introduced to Strider, he's given a simple, short, and less heroic theme. As he begins to become a hero and protects the Hobbits, specifically against the Black Riders, his musical material replicates that, and he's given a theme, Aragorn's theme, that captures his awakening. The Rivendell theme is a brilliant example of the unique musical nature of the elves within the Middle-earth films. It's historical, majestic, grand, and comforting. In the main texture, we have harp glissandos, long drawn-out harmonics in the violins and violas, an arpeggio on the cellos, and a strong choral presence. Arwen's first appearance in the film is also a very important moment. She has a much more intimate musical presence. This returns for the final time at the conclusion of the series during Aragorn's coronation. Arwen and Aragorn's theme is also a very strong part of these 2 characters. This would eventually lead the way into the Evenstar theme. The Lothorian elves, on the other hand, have a totally different sound, far more Eastern and exotic, describing their antiquity. As we move into the second act of the film, we are exposed to the danger of the journey ahead. One of the major sequences in the Fellowship of the Ring is the journey through the mines of Moria. This sequence is accompanied by a theme based around parallel fifths. It has a strong masculine sound, consisting of 60 male vocalists. The Dwarrowdelf theme, first heard in Balin's tomb, represents the dwarves' pride, as well as their sadness, carrying with it a feeling of what Shore describes to be ruined grandeur. During this sequence, we also have a few monsters who get their own musical themes. The Watcher in the Water gets a theme made up of trumpets, trombones, a tuba, and a bass drum. The theme is heavily aleatoric, and is a threatening presence that doesn't completely let you go until they have finally escaped. The Cave Troll theme is much more structured yet still aggressive, and is carried by many various clusters and low tremolo strings.
A Balrog, a demon of the ancient world.
The Balrog is the only monster theme to include a choir. This theme brings out all of the fiery potential out of the low end of the orchestra. Choir, cellos, and contrabasses are all doubled in aggressive 8th note stabs. The choir is also given long sustain notes, doubled by the trombones and tuba, and the horns are given clusters, all of which create the sound of the Balrog. The final batch of themes in the Fellowship of the Ring are the Ring Quest themes. These are used to highlight certain moments along Frodo and Sam's journey. These themes would include the Dangerous Passes theme, the subtle yet powerful Evil Times theme, as well as the themes capturing pivotal moments in the journey, such as Boromir's death, and Gandalf's farewell. These themes are used later in the films to provide remembrance to the characters. One additional theme is Nature's Reclamation, which is also sometimes referred to as the Rescue theme. It's sung by a boy soprano and is first used when Gandalf encounters a moth while being captured by Saruman. Apart from there being dozens and dozens of rich musical themes throughout the Lord of the Rings films, as well as 66 additional themes in the Hobbit films, another strong aspect is Shore's orchestral colors in various harmonic languages. Shore is a fan of using tools called modes, which are normally used in one of two ways: melodic modal writing or harmonic modal writing. Because Shore doesn't limit himself to the two standard modes, major and minor, he's able to use these various modes throughout the series to describe the different elements of Middle-earth, even sometimes combining various harmonic elements from different modes together in something called modal mixture. The Middle-earth Orchestra is vast, with a core 96-piece orchestra and 100-person choir, and with additional soloists you have over 330 players in both the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films. This includes a multitude of vocal soloists, cast performers, over a dozen specialized ethnic instruments, an orchestra, choir, and more. For the main orchestra palette, that includes a massive percussion section consisting of bass drums, taikos, snares, tom-toms, anvils, various cymbals, bass marimba, and more. We also have 16 first violins, 14 seconds, 12 violas, 10 cellos, and 8 contrabasses, as well as a 15-piece brass section, 12-piece wind section, piano, celeste, and also a 30-piece boys choir and 60-piece mixed choir. There's also a large portion of practical music, which is essentially music that characters can hear in the film. All of these are examples of why the score is so unique and timeless. The finale of The Fellowship of the Ring ends with what seems to be the breaking of the Fellowship. Following the death of Boromir, a weakened Fellowship theme captures their sense of uncertainty. Then, as Adams describes, on the opposite shore, another Hobbit's understanding variation meets Frodo and Sam with a renewed determination and a willingness to accept what fate dictates. And as the credits roll, a faint glimpse of hope arises, prefacing the continuation of the journey.
It's somewhat intuitive. Some people have asked me that before because I didn't set out on a pure plan of themes and motifs. And I felt that there was certain, I did it, I think I've mentioned this, and I did it as in terms of clarity of storytelling. Like Gandalf doesn't have a theme in Fellowship of the Ring, but Gandalf is a messenger. He's mysterious. A theme would have given him more clarity, which I didn't want to do. I wanted him to have that mysterious aspect to it. I didn't give a lot of characters themes in Fellowship of the Ring. They had more to do with cultures, like Lothlorien. I wanted to make sure there was a clarity between Lothlorien and Rivendell in particular. Because Tolkien, he broadens Middle-earth by showing these dualities. He doesn't just show you Rohan, he also shows you Gondor, two worlds of men and two worlds of elves. And this creates a broader spectrum to the entire world that he's creating. And so I needed to follow his technique. We did a concert in New York at Radio City Music Hall years ago, and I brought all Tolkien's papers from Marquette University, and you could study how his creation evolved. And I was trying to do that as well. So with the themes and motifs, it was just trying to provide clarity to the story for filmmaking purposes. Part of the way that I developed thematic ideas was that I didn't necessarily always go back and look in my journal to how, say, how Gollum's theme was done. And then as I was at this point, way past that, years past that, I would always try to do things from memory, and that way I would change and evolve the thematic ideas. I would change the meter or the tempo, not always looking back. So there wasn't a grand plan, and the reason I mentioned Tolkien's papers is that we were doing the same thing, going step by step, trying to find our way through the story. Didn't have the grand plan to it.
If you don't mind me saying so, you got so excited when you were talking about this. Like, I can tell you still love it.
Yes, I do. I mean, they had to kind of stop me from writing it. And, I spent close to 4 years writing Lord of the Rings, and I orchestrated and conducted and produced all the recordings and everything. So, I mean, it was really a labor of love, and I do love Tolkien's world. I went back into it in The Hobbit, and it's quite enjoyable for me to work in that world.
The beginning of The Two Towers begins with the soaring string melody as we move over the mountains of Moria. Finally, we make our way into the mountain where we see the events of Gandalf's fight with the Balrog take place. Shore once again returns to the orchestral textures of the Balrog with fiery percussion and low brass. He also introduces a brand new choral text called the Abyss to describe Gandalf's fall to the world below. The text reads, "No shaft of air can breach it, no breath of air comes from it, only an endless dark rises deep from the beginnings of the world." Finally, the scene ends and we are put right back where we ended in the Fellowship of the Ring. When The Two Towers opens, the fellowship that formed in the first film has now been broken. The first narrative in The Two Towers follows Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, which eventually leads to finding Gandalf, uniting with Rohan, and fighting to defend Helm's Deep in the third act of the film. The second path follows Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, a character that was introduced in the first film but majorly expanded upon in The Two Towers, both narratively and musically. The final major storyline follows Merry and Pippin, who spend most of the movie in Fangorn Forest uniting with the Ents to defeat Isengard and Saruman. As the characters make their way on the journey, different musical elements follow them. For example, as Sauron and the Ring continue to influence Frodo, we see more and more dark musical material, including the History of the Ring theme and the Seduction of the Ring theme. The Broken Fellowship theme also begins to rebuild itself as Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas grow stronger as a unit. And when Merry and Pippin encounter the Ents, spending the rest of the film with them, we have developed musical material from the Shire, the continued use of the Nature's Reclamation theme, and a brand new musical landscape to describe the Ents in Fangorn Forest. Also, with Isengard and Mordor building in numbers and strength throughout the film, Isengard's 5/4 theme, Orc theme, the Evil of Sauron theme, and the Power of Mordor theme continue to gain prominence and develop. Included throughout the film is also the heavy incorporation of choral texts. These would include those associated with Rohan, like the Lament for Theodred, Theoden's choral passage titled The King, which is heard when Theoden is awakened from his curse, as well as those associated with Gandalf, the Ents, as well as the prominent ones featured in the first film relating to the elves, the ring wraiths, and Mordor.
Early on in writing Fellowship of the Ring, in a discussion that I had with Philippa Boyens, I talked about all of the poetry and song lyrics that are inherent in Tolkien's book. I thought, was there a way of putting that, when you're making a film, you can't always stop and read a poem or sing a song. So with Lord of the Rings, I was trying to create a historical piece, a piece that had a sense of antiquity, describing a world 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. And of course, I was using instruments from all over the world, and sometimes primitive instruments from Africa and from India and Far East, to describe this world, but also the voice, as we know, was one of the earliest instruments. So by using the voice of the choir and the soloists and the boys' choir, it was a way of putting all of Tolkien's languages back into the film, but in a very subtle way because they went into the score. The choirs are singing in all the Tolkien languages, Sindarin, Quenya, Andunaic, Black Speech, Dwarvish. Those are all Old English, that's all inherent now in the film. We used David Sallow, did the translations, and Rushing Carty was an Irish linguist. She taught the choir and the soloists to sing correctly in those Tolkien languages. Because when you watch Tolkien's, any of the film made by him, he was very interested in this, not only in the writing of those languages, he was an expert as a philologist, in the creation of ancient languages, but he was interested in what they sounded like particularly.
When the Fellowship theme reappears, it isn't quite as noble as it once was in the Mines of Moria, which as Shore describes is the largest use of the theme in the first film. The Fellowship has lost a member, it's split up into multiple parts, and it isn't as unified and strong as it was in the first film. It is, as Adams describes, battered and dimmed, but proudly representing a coalition of man, elf, dwarf, and wizard. Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, otherwise referred to as the Three Hunters at the beginning of the film, are the ones carrying the Fellowship theme. which is used as a constant symbol of hope, honor, and determination. Merry and Pippin are carrying the Shire theme while with the Ents in Fangorn Forest. While Frodo and Sam, on the other hand, are constantly overshadowed by the growing danger and influence of Gollum and the growing strength of Sauron. In addition to continuing the musical evolution of the content introduced in the Fellowship of the Ring, Shore introduces a few new themes in relation to the Hobbits and the Fellowship. When Gandalf surprisingly returns as Gandalf the White in the Two Towers, he's given his own theme. In the Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf didn't have a theme, which was to, as Shore said, to give him a light sense of mystery. The theme, as Adams describes, is built from the first 3 pitches of the Fellowship theme. It incorporates lush harp and celeste runs, swelling brass, and a strong string melody. It's vivid and strong, just as Gandalf's character is, returning to finish the work he started in the Fellowship of the Ring, to destroy the ring once and for all, and to bring peace to Middle-earth. The lullaby setting theme is characterized by the dovetailing between the first violins and the clarinets. It's gentle and has a sense of wonder to it, which creates contrast to Frodo and Sam's overall musical direction. It's used primarily while Pippin and Merry are in the woods with Treebeard. The playful setting theme is also very closely connected with Merry and Pippin, and represents their sense of adventure. Shore also introduces a new accompaniment to the Shire theme, the Hobbit's Antics, which has a slightly jumpy quality mimicking the end cap motif at the end of the Fellowship theme.
Pippin, everyone knows. I'm the tall one, you're the short one.
Please, Merry.
Though throughout the film Sauron's influences, as well as the constant threat of Gollum, tend to occupy much of Frodo and Sam's musical material, there are still occasional callbacks to the Shire's musical elements, which acts as a small source of light throughout their dark path.
I don't usually hold with foreign food, but this other stuff, it's not bad.
When we're introduced to Rohan, we're also introduced to a new array of themes. Shore's influences for Rohan were mainly Nordic. The musical material consists of a latticework of repeated interweaving phrases, much like the culture's art and architecture. The first theme is the Rohan's fanfare. Its orchestral texture is mainly carried by brass and the Hardanger fiddle. The Hardanger fiddle is an instrument originating in Norway. It has 8 strings instead of 4 and is made from a far thinner wood. The Riders of Rohan theme is a bit different from the Rohan fanfare, as it has a steady movement to it, to replicate their speed and agility. Eowyn's character is both three-dimensional and independent. She's initially given a short motif, but once Gandalf releases King Theoden from his curse, Eowyn's theme is combined with the Rohan's fanfare to create Eowyn and Theoden's theme, a signal of their independence from Wormtongue and Saruman's influence. The next theme that's rather slow to develop is Aragorn and Eowyn's theme. Melodically, it's very similar to Eowyn's theme, but in this case it takes its time a bit more. As Adams puts it, it has a rather pleading quality versus a more traditional adversive love theme.
I made some stew. It isn't much, but it's hot.
Wormtongue's theme isn't your casual villain theme. Unlike Sauron, Saruman, or any of the monsters' themes, it's far more slithery and sneaks its way around, just as the character does, trying to press his evil influences on the Poison King.
You are banished forthwith from the kingdom of Rohan, all its domains.
The Ents are mysterious creatures seemingly lost in time, fated beings from what was once a thriving group, suffering under the tyranny of Saruman. For the Ents' theme, Shore ended up using actual wood logs as a percussive element. He said, "I wanted wood sounds, so there are log drums, bass marimbas, bassoons, and double basses." The theme itself is a phrase built from repeated half-step movements, describing the weight and grandeur of the creatures, but with a slight lack of maneuverability. Treebeard, the Ent Merry and Pippin form a relationship with throughout the film, has his own theme that has a bit more of a majestic quality, formed using 2 major chords played 1 tritone apart. Another small motif in relation to the Ents is the Small Stones theme. Since it's built from long drawn-out chords like the In Dreams theme from the first film, its purpose is to subtly illustrate the presence of the hobbits in the forest. With the Ents, we commonly hear the Nature's Reclamation theme, notably at the ending of the film when the Ents march in Isengard. though with the Ents this theme has much more weight than when it was first introduced in the Fellowship of the Ring, yet still incorporating the boy's soprano voice. Up until the third film, where the orchestration shifts almost completely to brass. When we first see Gollum in the Two Towers, he slowly crawls towards Frodo and Sam, attacking them trying to get the ring. Interestingly enough, we have the classic suspension harmonies of the ring wraiths during this scene, as Gollum's objective are seemingly one and the same with the ring wraiths. Throughout, this threatening presence doesn't go away, but it lurks around, building its way up to a grand crescendo in the Return of the King in Shelob's lair. Though the Pity of Gollum theme was introduced in the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers expands heavily on his musical material, as he becomes a stronger part of the narrative. While the Pity of Gollum theme has hints of sadness and mixed motivations,
We must have the precious.
Gollum's Menace theme, which is played on a cymbalum, has a dark, striking ethnic sound, describing Gollum's animalistic behavior. And at many times the Gollum's Menace theme overshadows the Pity of Gollum theme, and is even combined with the Ring theme to show the darkness that was brought upon him. At the ending of the Two Towers, Shore also introduces a piece called Gollum's Song, which uses, as Adams describes, snarling rises through distantly related minor chords. This is used during the end to accent Gollum's evil intentions with Frodo and Sam. In the Two Towers, we also have a new theme in relation to the Ring, called the Fate of the Ring theme. This theme's prominence grows throughout the second and third film as Frodo and Sam make their way towards Mordor. This theme acts as somewhat of a web, which ties all the other Ring themes together. Though the Mimikills play a much larger role during the Battle of Pelennor Fields in the Return of the King, they make their first official appearance in the Two Towers. The theme has low string stomps, busy harp glissandos, and it also has a hanging Tibetan gong to provide an ethnic quality to the creature. The instrument associated with the Mimikill is a dilruba, which is essentially a bowed sitar.
My lord, will follow you to whatever end.
Theoden's monologue, Where's the Horse and the Rider, acts as the grand prelude to the Battle of Helm's Deep. It is used as swords are being distributed and they prepare for battle, which in the beginning seems quite hopeless. Yet this cue, with its warming choir, lush strings, and simple yet effective harmony, it provides a sense of honor and commitment. Now we get into the Battle of Helm's Deep, where thematic material from Isengard, Rohan, and the Lothlorien Elves are all brought together. In addition, we have the heavy incorporation of two new Isengard themes, the Cruelty of the Orcs, which was introduced during the wolf attack scene, and the Uruk-hai battle theme, played as the orcs breach Helm's Deep's walls. We also have the heavy use of the brute Isengard 5/4 rhythm throughout the scene. These musical elements are quite literally clashing with Rohan's fanfare and the Lothlorien Elves theme throughout the sequence. We also get hints of the Fellowship theme throughout this section, which is to highlight the presence of Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas. One thing to note is Shore's variation of the Lothlorien theme. He's able to turn what was once a faint, echoey vocal phrase from the first film into a militaristic march, which is an example of how accompaniment can bring a whole other dimension to one thematic idea. As Aragorn announces the retreat, the Evil Times theme enters. With the unusually prominent thematic presence of the more darker themes, it begins to look like evil has conquered good. But when the Battle of Helm's Deep seems lost, Gandalf the White and 3,000 riders of Rohan come to the rescue, bringing the battle to an end. This specific section utilizes the Gandalf the White theme as well as the Nature's Reclamation theme. At the end of the Two Towers, Frodo descends deeper and deeper into madness, constantly being pulled under by the forces of the Ring, Sauron, and the Black Riders. At the end of the film, while in Osgiliath, Frodo encounters a Black Rider, which is accented by an eerie microtonal solo vocal passage and a waterfountain. But then Sam pulls Frodo away, and there is a light moment accompanied by the Shire theme, bringing the events of the Two Towers to a close, giving the story the hopeful push that it needs to move into the final battle for Middle-earth. The ending of the Two Towers brings a sense of resolution, but at the same time, the battle isn't won yet. Isengard is defeated, Helm's Deep is defended, and Frodo and Sam continue their journey to find a way into Mordor, to destroy the ring once and for all. While in the first film, Shore was introducing us to the world of Middle-earth with all of its various themes, harmonic languages, and orchestral textures, the Two Towers was all about developing that material as well as introducing new content that will be needed for the Return of the King. On the final shot of the film, as we peer over the mountains of Mordor and we see the fires of Mount Doom, we hear a ghostly musical selection, Gollum's song, which is, as Adams describes, Shore's way of saying, "We'll be there soon."
I was in my late 50s. I was maybe sort of mid-50s, about 55, I think, when I started on it. And so I had a lot of experience with orchestral orchestration, with conducting, with live recording. The piece was written for the London Philharmonic, an orchestra that I had worked with and recorded with for 15 years previous. It included everything I knew from my interest in opera, Italian opera, and then into German opera. It included everything I knew about orchestral recording, about orchestration, about composition. The compositional techniques used in the piece went from Bruckner to Penderecki into the modern techniques of 12-tone music.
Is there one piece you'll put on, you'll go like, I love this one, I just want to hear it?
Pieces from the trilogy.
Yeah, that's the one.
Are really something that when I hear them, they still are moving to me.
Massive battles, the resolution of brilliantly executed character arcs, and the finale to the journey that began in the Shire. The Return of the King is the epic finale of the trilogy, and the place where all the various elements brewing in the past two films finally come together. As we've seen in many franchises or trilogy finales, the final installment provides an amazing opportunity to showcase the musical material for one final time, and most importantly, to complete the musical development that's been shaping throughout the past films. As Adams describes, every character theme in each cultural style, every motif associated with Tolkien's work must reach the destination set before it in the previous two scores. The Return of the King begins with a prologue depicting Smeagol's transformation into Gollum. It begins with soft music from the Shire, more specifically the Hobbit's Antics theme, which was introduced while Merry and Pippin were in Fangorn Forest. This musical element in the scene transforms into something much darker and menacing. We hear the History of the Ring theme being played on a solo violin, making the theme more personal and mysterious, and slightly less grand compared to the version featured on the title cards. Smeagol's transformation really begins when we hear the Seduction of the Ring theme. In this case, it describes Smeagol's sudden obsession with the ring, which never goes away. The montage of visually unsettling shots showing the demise of Smeagol is accompanied by the History of the Ring theme. This is to show the large amount of time passing by, and the sequence ends with a subtle reveal of the theme representing his dark downfall, the Pity of Gollum theme. What Gondor represents for Aragorn and the Fellowship, being the place that will eventually bring about the Return of the King, makes it an important landmark and a major pillar in the film. We first hear Gondor's theme when we're introduced to Boromir during the Council of Elrond scene in the Fellowship of the Ring. It includes large interval leaps, giving off a rather confident and noble sound. Gondor's theme also has two variations, Gondor in Decline and Gondor in Ascension. These are used to follow Gondor in the narrative in The Return of the King. The Minas Tirith theme is the first Gondor theme introduced in the series. Though it's slightly less recognizable compared to the Realm of Gondor theme, it plays a strong role, notably in the Return of the King when it turns into the Gondor Reborn theme. Because of Pippin's exposure to the enemy in Rohan, Gandalf and Pippin set out for Gondor, where Pippin meets Denethor. Here, Pippin offers his services out of guilt about Boromir's death. The element used to describe Denethor is a pan flute. His theme slightly echoes the new Orcs of Mordor theme, showing the potential Denethor has to allow the destruction of Gondor to come about. Because Denethor refuses to call in reinforcements out of his own ignorance, Pippin and Gandalf must figure out a way to light the beacon of Gondor, which is connected in a vast network back to Rohan. During this sequence, we have the combination of three major thematic elements, orchestrated in Shore's signature Lord of the Rings style. The first element is the weakness and redemption theme, which can be traced all the way back to the first few minutes of the Fellowship of the Ring. This is used to show the call for help. Shore also utilizes two versions of the Gondor theme, the standard version and Gondor in Decline. The next scene, which marks the first battle in the film, is the invasion of Osgiliath. During the scene, a large number of orcs silently invade during the night, and Faramir is forced to retreat. During the sequence, we have a violent clash between the Mordor/Orc themes and Gondor's themes. Though during the sequence, the most overwhelming theme is the Threat of Mordor theme, showing Mordor's forces pressing in as we get closer and closer to the Battle of Pelennor Fields.
Is over. The time of the Orc has come.
Soon after, Faramir marches out with a small army for Osgiliath. But instead of being a battle, it becomes a massacre. During this sequence, we hear the eerie song The Edge of Night, sung by Pippin. It's at this moment we see the true devastation and evil power of the forces that are almost at their destination, as well as the ignorance and cowardice of Denethor. This soft, somber musical moment gives the rest of the film a sense of urgency. The Shelob's lair on the stairs of Cirith Ungol is spread out throughout the first portion of the film. It's a dangerous path, but a chance Frodo and Sam must take. One of the themes used prominently when they have a close encounter with the Witch King is the new Orcs of Mordor theme. Though reminiscent of the Ringwraith's harmonies, it focuses much more on the impact of the brass and the percussion. And unlike the subtle versatility of the Ringwraith's theme, the Orcs of Mordor theme is always played in a very harsh way. Their journey up the mountain is accented by half-step movements, describing the slow and dangerous path. As Gollum gets closer and closer to his objective, bringing an end to Sam and Frodo in Shelob's lair and taking the ring, Gollum's musical material that Shore introduced in the Two Towers lurks around. Gollum's final move before taking the ring is parting Sam and Frodo, which have been together every step of the way since the Shire. This is his way of weakening Frodo in his determination. The sequence is initially accompanied by the Gollum's Metis theme and the History of the Ring theme, but following Gollum's scheme, which at first seems to be successful, we hear a sorrowful callback to the Shire theme. When we get into the cave, things get rather dark. Shelob's theme is the final creature theme that Shore wrote for the series. It is, in a way, a dark culmination of many of the elements we've seen prior. Twisted string tremolo clusters, woodwind and low brass stabs, and a rhythmic bed beneath tying it all together. Once Frodo escapes and encounters Gollum outside the cave, we hear a dark six-note figure recalling the Ring theme as Frodo describes how he's going to destroy it. After seemingly getting rid of Gollum, Frodo continues on the path, but is once again attacked by Shelob. When Sam finally appears coming to Frodo's aid, we hear a powerful rendition of the Fellowship theme. variation of the Shire theme called Heroic Settings. This theme represents the heroic evolution of the four hobbits. Then, Shelob takes one final lunge at Sam, but Sam wounds it, and the creature is forced back into the darkness. But Frodo is soon captured by a group of orcs. Sam, fearful yet full of determination, sets off to save Frodo and finish this thing off once and for all. After the lighting of the beacons, Rohan, as well as Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, and Merry begin their journey to Gondor. One of the major stops along the way is at Dunharrow. While here, we follow a few different musical directions. The musical direction of the Army of the Dead, Merry's light musical aesthetic, much like it was in Fangorn Forest, carrying along the Shire material,
A true esquire of Rohan.
as well as Rohan's. While the Rohan theme isn't as powerful as it was at their homeland, it still continues to develop and follow them along their journey. Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, and the army of Rohan come to the realization that their force isn't strong enough to make an impact on the war to come. We're first introduced to the Army of the Dead theme as they peer down the path in the mountain, complemented by ghostly echoes reciting a warning to all those who dare to enter.
They will answer to the King of Gondor.
While meeting with Lord Elrond, Aragorn is given a sword, first seen during the initial moments of the Fellowship of the Ring. This moment is accented by a lightly orchestrated rendition of the Minas Tirith theme, showing its place of origin. We also have hints of the Rivendell theme to show the presence of Lord Elrond. On the topic of Rivendell's musical elements, while they aren't quite as prominent as they were in the Fellowship of the Ring, they are still present, mainly following Arwen and Aragorn's relationship. The Evenstar theme was first introduced in the Two Towers, and it's used again in The Return of the King when Arwen sees a vision of a possible future with Aragorn and their son. This theme has a lush and peaceful presence. Although Arwen is completely absent from the second act of the film, a new piece titled Arwen's Song provides a sense of warmth and functions as a beacon of hope. While meeting with Elrond, Aragorn realizes there is only one option in order to gain forces within such a restricted period of time. While the Army of the Dead's musical material was very subtle as Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli peered down the Dimholt Road, when they finally make their way into the mountain, the sound of the dead becomes fully unearthed. The musical landscape is made up of clustered choirs and sweeping aleatoric orchestral textures. The theme itself, as Adams points out, is completely written mid-bass clef and below. He also notes, whereas the women's choirs represent the wellspring of eternal lives in the Elvish themes, the cloud of men's voices represent interminable death in the Army of the Dead. And after a promise of freedom, it appears a new ally has been made for the battle ahead. Before we begin with the Battle of Pelennor Fields, it's important we introduce a few additional themes that will be important for this sequence. Next is the Cruelty of the Orcs theme. The main figure creating movement in this theme is eighth note bassoons, constantly creating a dark musical motor. There's also high protruding violin tremolo clusters to create that sense of anarchy and destruction that the orcs bring to everything in their path. Up to this point, both Merry and Pippin's musical material have been under the umbrella of the Shire/Hobbit material. During this battle, Merry's bravery and heroism are awarded with a theme that subtly combines, as Adams describes, the B phrase of the Fellowship theme, the minor tonalities of Rohan's music, and the linear rising pluck of the Shire elements. And with that being said, the battle begins. When the battle opens and the orcs arrive outside Minas Tirith, Gondor's theme is almost completely lost. The theme is overshadowed by the threat outside the walls, with constant descending thirds, horn trills, and Mordor's sinister thematic material. Finally, we return to Gandalf, who is one of the most prominent sources of hope throughout the sequence. The White Rider theme, which was established in the Two Towers, returns as Gandalf races to lead the defensive against the orcs.
Send these foul beasts into the abyss!
Throughout this sequence, the Gondor and Decline variation is used quite prominently. And as the battle picks up, we have the entrance of the Ringwraith theme, the Orcs of Mordor theme, as well as the Evil of the Ring theme. The only faint glimpse of hope in this section is the Fellowship theme, which is used very shortly as Gandalf comes to the aid of the hobbits.
This is no place for a hobbit!
The next section of the battle begins with the arrival of Rohan, which uses the Nature's Reclamation theme, as well as Rohan's theme, played on the Hardanger fiddle. When Pippin tries to save Faramir from Denethor, is the first time we hear the battlefield heroism motif. Adams describes it as, beneath a brilliant D minor cluster and a paradoxysm of self-hatred, Denethor runs to the outermost wall, the top tier of Minas Tirith, and throws himself off. The next sequence is filled with sounds of thundering percussion, cymbal crashes, and rapid 16th notes, describing the weight and power of the Mimikul. As the Witch King begins its dive from the skies onto the battlefield, we hear an aggressive musical alarm, the Mordor outline motif. Face to face with the Witch King, Éowyn is forced to make a move. Bravely, Éowyn lunges at the beast, decapitating its head. We then have a faint choral presence singing the dark harmonies of the Ringwraith theme, as well as descending thirds, highlighting the dark anger of the Witch King. Finally, the Witch King is defeated, and we hear a rendition of Éowyn and Theoden's theme. Finally, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and the army of the dead arrive to finish the battle. It's during this sequence when we get a much lighter musical atmosphere, with a few renditions of the Fellowship theme, showing the heroism and perseverance of good against evil. And as King Theoden passes, we hear Final Remembrance, a solo horn recalling Rohan's iconic fanfare, describing the end of an era.
You have to let me go.
Back in Mordor, Sam helps Frodo escape, and they are forced to cross the massive fields of Mordor filled with thousands of orcs. This whole sequence is infested with the darkest of Mordor's musical colors. The Threat of Mordor theme, the 5-beat pattern, the Evil Times theme, they all loom over Frodo and Sam as they are so close, yet seemingly so far from their destination. Back at the Black Gates, the remainder of the Fellowship and the soldiers from the army of Gondor and Rohan create a diversion that allows Sam and Frodo to traverse through the dark field of Mordor. We hear hints of the Gondor and Decline theme and the Evil Times theme as the musical color of Sauron's lieutenant.
It takes more to make a king than a broken elvish blade.
In an act of bravery and determination, Aragorn leads a full-on attack. And it's here where Adams describes, the Fellowship theme sounds in full chorus and orchestra in a brilliant C major. It is the ultimate act of the Fellowship, an act that embodies both the company's mandate to destroy the ring and the ideals the ring threatens. After making their way across the field of Mordor, Sam and Frodo begin to ascend Mount Doom. Yet Frodo seems weak and incapable of making the final steps of the journey. But in an act of friendship and strength, Sam picks Frodo up and begins to carry him up the mountain. Once again, though, they encounter Gollum, who's determined to prevent the ring from being destroyed and take it for himself. It is here where we get the final reiteration of Gollum's dark musical material. After fighting him off, Sam realizes Frodo has made it into the chamber of Mount Doom, and it is here where we hear the final references to the history of the ring theme, the seduction of the ring theme, Mount Doom's theme, as well as Mordor's descending third motif, the final musical callbacks of the evil forces of Sauron and Mordor.
Just let it go!
arrives in the chamber, we hear the finale to the story of the ring. In the fires of Orodrum, the One must be cast. This is the price that must be paid. Only thus his powers will be undone. Only thus a great evil unmade. There is no other choice. There is no other way. One of you must take it. One of you must pay. And it's with that the One Ring is finally destroyed. And so it is, a journey that began all the way back in the Shire finally comes to an end. Musical narrative rich of over 90 themes and motifs, various harmonic languages and orchestral landscapes, incredible development, and a massive amount of attention to detail. Howard Shore's Lord of the Rings scores serve as a true testament to what's possible in film music, and the extent of the true power of a film score, not only serving the picture, but enhancing it. Lord of the Rings is truly so much more than just another book series or film franchise. It's a journey that once completed feels almost impossible to describe. With the plethora of rich characters, a brilliantly executed narrative, and technical mastery, The Lord of the Rings is something that has and will continue to stand the test of time.
You bow to no one.
As Frodo wishes his friends goodbye and takes Gandalf's hand boarding the boat, we hear the Greyhaven's theme, the final musical farewell, as Frodo's ship passes into the west.
Lay down your sweet and weary head. Night is falling. You've come to journey's end.